Go ahead and like and subscribe. My name is Paul Lenahan. This is Angel of Discord, and I've been making decks, right? Commander decks, and selling them online to try to make a little bit of side cash. And I was getting all these great reviews and rave reviews on how I was making these budget decks and selling them super cheap, and they're really good. I was also getting really great reviews about how well I was able to describe the deck. And I had a few people recommend, go ahead and throw some of these videos up on YouTube, see what happens. So I figured, why not? Let's give it a shot. So today we're discussing the first deck that I've made, which is an EDGAR Markov budget deck. It's not the most budget deck we're looking at, but you have to keep in mind that the commander himself is pretty expensive. And we are in the physical version using the oversized card, which can save just a little bit of money versus the normal card, even though it does keep you from ever being able to shuffle a card into the deck, but just always send it to the command zone and you'll be fine. We also, of note, have a shiny vampire token. Okay, so let's break it down, and now we're going to move over to the iPad. So first off, our commander, EDGAR Markov, is one of the best commanders in the game, or at least one of the funnest, in the sense that he has an eminence ability. So he has abilities giving us value even when he's not on the field. Even though EDGAR himself is a little expensive to play in terms of mana, he's always going to be generating us value throughout the game, which is not something you can say of many commanders. Knight of the Ebon Legion is probably the best one-drop black even has to offer, let alone being a vampire. He's got an ability that, based on how much damage we deal at the end step, he does get +1/+1 counters, which is going to be a synergistic ability within this deck. Not to mention that his pump can make him carry a game alone. Voldaren Epicure, once again, this already ties back in. He's dealing damage upon entry, giving us a blood token. And he's a 1/1 for 1. Blood Artist has a name for itself for a reason. That whenever a creature dies, any creature on the board, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And in a game of Commander, you've got 4 times as many creatures dying. Blood Tithe Harvester. This guy has made a name for himself inside of Pioneer already, and he definitely was pretty powerful in Standard because he is a removal spell, the blood tokens, but he is also a 3/2 for 2, so he can go either way. Cemetery Gatekeeper. This card is a little tricky to play. If you're really beginning and just starting, you might even want to take him out because you need to play this right. Partly that it needs to come in once there's something in the graveyard to remove for you to get the value out of him that you need. I mean, he is a 2/1 first strike, but you don't want to remove a creature in this deck because you have a lot of creatures. So what you want to exile is probably either a Planeswalker, because you don't have very many, or a artifact, because you only have 3, or best of all would probably be an enchantment, because you really just have the 1. His whole trick is that you need to make sure that you exile something and make him work like an Eidolon that only affects your opponents. Gatekeeper of Malachor. It's an edict effect on top of a 2/2 body. Gifted Aetherborn. There's not much to say there. A Death Touch Lifelinker for 2. Vampire Socialites. The same sort of pattern that we had with the Knight of the Ebon Legion and some of these other cards. Getting +1/+1 counters as long as opponents have lost life. And she's going to put them on every vampire that we've got. Draina, also putting +1/+1 counters, but just when they attack. And note with Draina that she does have first strike, so they will get the +1/+1 counters that turn. The Purifier, so now we have not only synergy between dealing damage, but because of lifelink, which is prevalent in this deck, we're going to also have synergy with life gain, which is almost one and the same. Mathis the Fiend Seeker. This card could also be a budget version's commander, but he just doesn't bring as much value, of course, as our EDGAR Markov, who is our commander. So this is kind of playing politics inside of commander, because it's going to go ahead and make sure that all our opponents are trying to get the advantage of putting that hit out on one of the creatures that's a threat. The Nighthawk Scavenger. He's oftentimes a 5/3 flying Death Touch lifelink for 3, which is, needless to say, pretty dang good. Odric, at worst, this is going to be a 3/3 for 3 for you. But at best, he might create a couple blood tokens. Rakish Air, once again, all that synergy between the +1/+1 counters, the damage incentives, and with all the lifelink, the life gain incentives. We've got another life gain incentive here with Silver Smoke Ghoul. He's going to be coming back from the grave every time we gain enough life, which allows us to start to sacrifice him to other abilities and reap the benefits, or even just sack him to himself. And then we can use those enter the battlefield triggers every turn, by the way, off of Edgar and other vampires, so that whenever a vampire enters the battlefield, we get more vampires, etc., by sacking him over and over. Stormkirk Captain. This guy is just a classic lord. We've got Vampire Nighthawk, the vampire that made it all begin. We got Vitu, the Lord of the Dusk Rose. This guy is really kind of key to this deck in the sense that he's going to make it so whenever we gain life, the opponent loses that much life, and he can give us lifelink. So it's going to kind of tie all of our synergies into one synergy right there. Voldaren Ambusher, we've got this guy is going to be kind of a kill spell, as well as a 2/2 for 3. Welcoming Vampire. This is some of the only card draw we have in the deck. This is obviously very valuable to have on the battlefield, especially since most of our creatures are coming in very somewhat low attack. Yahimi, this is another possible commander if you went mono black. He just gets very large very quickly, and also is pretty hard to get rid of. Speaking of difficult to get rid of, go ahead and sacrifice Edgar the Charmed Groom to him so that you get more creature generation. Because Edgar's flip side, as long as he dies and isn't exiled, is going to be this coffin that generates vampires every turn until after 3 turns he flips back to being a lord. This card is invulnerable as long as it doesn't get exiled, which makes it very powerful. Elenda the Dusk Rose. This is one of the more expensive cards in the deck, as well as Edgar. EDGAR MARKOV, that is. This creature is also a fantastic commander if you just want black-white. Not only will she become giant and be able to deal a lot of damage and gain you a lot of life, but she'll also die and create many little vampires for them to deal with that also have lifelink. So it's more of that synergy that we're looking for, and more creatures to sacrifice, as well as, I think you get the picture, as well as just so much synergy within the deck. Henrika Damnathi, once again, another place where you can sacrifice some creatures, you can draw some cards, which is rare in this deck, and you can also flip her to become somewhat of a lord, as well as a powerhouse creature. Camber the Plunderer, and if we have Veto in play, whenever we gain life, we deal damage. And the blood tokens, we also have some synergy there. So the more that we're kind of playing off all these synergies, the more they'll just naturally happen within gameplay even. Blood Baron of Vizkopa, protection from white and from black, which is good because those are some of the colors that really easily exile, right? So we've got Edgar, the Charmed Groom, who, if they don't have those colors, might be very difficult to remove, but we've also got Blood Baron to balance out so that if they do have those colors, he's very difficult to remove. So as long as you have 30 or more life, which you might very well have, but your opponent also has to have 10 or less life, he becomes a 10/10 flying lifelink. Champion of Dusk. This is going to make you lose life, but with all this lifelink, you're probably going to be fine in order to draw those cards, which is, once again, rare in black. So we're really taking advantage of any card draw we can get. We've got Draina, the Last Blood Chief. She's just a resurrector. Malachor Blood Witch. This is another card that is going to make the opponents lose life and we gain life. And if we have other synergies in play, we're going to also be dealing damage every time we gain life. And it's just going to become kind of a loop. Radiant Epicure, another card where we deal damage, gain life. 5/5 for 5. We have 3 colors, so 3 damage and gain 3 life. Westgate Regent. This is a card that I really like because of his ward ability, but he also can become very large if not dealt with, because notice that whenever he deals combat damage, put that many +1/+1 counters. So at first he's a 4/4, then an 8/8, then a 16/16, and so forth, 32/32. Crossway Troublemakers, you can draw a card. Also, attacking vampires gain death touch and lifelink, which makes them not only a threat to block, but also gives them lifelink so that we're gaining life and getting those synergies going no matter what. Olivia's Intendants. This card's great because it can ping, and if you have a lot of mana laying around, you can actually deal quite a bit of damage and kill off a rather large creature, or just add that one extra damage that you need to push it over the edge. Timothar, the Baron of Bats. Again, another card that has Ward, but can allow us to bring some of our vampires back. Butcher of Malachor. If you can imagine, like maybe having a Blood Artist in play, a Baron of Bats, and a Butcher of Malachor, and then your Elenda dies, and you get a bunch of little 1/1s, and you start sacking them all. With this guy, I think it's a non-token vampire, so even if you're sacrificing other little creatures that you have laying around, whatever, then you're going to be bringing them back. You get the picture. Sorin the Mirthless. This guy gives us more card draw once again, but he's also creating on a fairly consistent basis more of these guys, more of the Vampire Nighthawks. He pumps them out. And then Sorin, Lord of Innistrad. This guy's going to pump out little vampires instead. And he's also going to give us a good emblem to power up some of our vampires, which can make a big difference if we're in that point in the game where we've got a lot of little lifelinkers that'll push us over the edge with just +1/+0 for a bunch of little lifelinkers that can really end a game. A Braid. This is a great card because it can either deal with a small creature, it can only target a creature, or destroy an artifact. Fateful Absence. This is a good card because it can target commanders. I meant planeswalkers as well as creatures. Even though they investigate, that's really a small price to pay to make them have to pay 2 to draw a card. Heartless Act. This can deal with a lot of creatures because most don't have counters. Infernal Grasp. 2 life is a small price to play to kill anything. Power Word Kill maybe is less good in this format than it is in other formats, but I still think it's pretty dang viable. Terminate. Obviously the best removal. In Commander, probably. Valorous Stance. This is either you can use this to save a creature like a Blood Artist or your commander or whatever. You can give indestructible, or you can just destroy something really, really big. Anguished Unmaking. Notice that it's exile. Bedevil. Another classic to Commander. Crackling Doom. They have to sack the creature with the greatest power. And it's each player. Kolaghan's Command. This card is so versatile. It's great in Modern. It's great in Pioneer. It's great in everything. Just because it's essentially always give you a 2-for-1 if you pull it off right. Vampire's Vengeance. This could board wipe goblins or something. Bloodchief's Thirst. Another kind of classic card to even Pioneer right now. Hungry for More. This card is kind of interesting. I was especially at first thinking that maybe it would trigger off some entering the battlefield vampire abilities, but then I realized that also because of the sacrifice at the end step, it's going to trigger some of our leaving the battlefield abilities, such as Butcher of Malachor or Blood Artist. Path to Peril. This can be a giant board wipe if you need to, or a little board wipe if they've got lots of tokens. Vindicate. Notice that can target a land. Call to the Feast. This just creates a lot of little vampires. So once again, entering the battlefield triggers sack tokens, things like that. Crippling Fear. That won't target vampires. Silver Quill Command. There's so much you can do with it. You can return a creature with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. Like let's say you've got, your welcoming vampire on the battlefield, and then you return like a Blood Artist, and then you also draw a card. Now you're drawing 2 cards. You're losing 1 life, but you're also creating an engine, and it's all for 4 mana. You got Olivia's Wrath. It's going to kind of board wipe everything that's not a vampire. If you have, like, let's say, a Land of the Dusk Rose just blew up and you have a million little 1/1s. Patriarch's Bidding. This card, you may just want to discard to some ability if you're up against goblins or something. But if there's not very many tribals, then you go ahead and play it. So it goes one way or the other. You've always got your blood tokens. So if it ends up that you're in a match where they have way more of their tribal creature in the graveyard than you do, then you can just blood token through it. But if you end up in a matchup where you are the biggest tribe, then you play it. On burial rights, this is a great way to get back either a lost engine or a lost powerhouse card. Soul Ring, because you just have to have that ramp in Commander. Arcane Signet, also a card that you just have to have. And Talisman of Indulgence, because it's maybe a little bit pricey for a mana rock, but it's also, I think, the best for Rakdos. We've got Greed. Okay, so as for lands, we've got the Bloodfell Caves, which is going to be just kind of an enters the battlefield tap, double land. We've got a lot of lands like that, so I'm going to just kind of skip through those. That one gives you a little life gain, which ties into our synergies for life gain if you're in a really desperate spot. Bojuka Bog can deal with Reanimator decks or anything that's playing off the graveyard. Instants and sorcery, graveyard kind of stuff. Castle Embrith is going to give a boost to all your creatures, which is pretty powerful. Caves of Kolios is another bit, a double land. We've got Cliffgate, which is another double land. We got Command Tower, which is the classic any color land. Cryptic Spires, another double land. Dragon Skull Summit, another double land. Drossford Bridge, notice it's indestructible, another artifact double land. Ebon Stronghold, this is kind of an interesting card because you can use it to trigger like sacrifice permanent triggers. You can also just add 2 to your mana pool if you're in a desperate spot to kind of create a dark ritual effect. Evolving Wilds, this is just to get, a basic land. It's a classic. Geothermal Bog, another double land. Mountains is going to be another double land. We've got the Carnarium is another double land. The Scoured Barrens is another gain life double land. Shadow Snarl, another double land. Notice the Sunlit Marsh, as well as the Geothermal Bog count as plains or swamps. With Shine Shadow Snarl, for example, when you have to reveal a swamp or a plains from your hand, you can reveal Sunlit Marsh and it counts as a plains or a swamp. Swamp, Temple of Silence, another double land that allows us to scry. I figured it wasn't worth putting the money investment like it is in Modern. I've noticed into land base. In Modern, you want to get those fetch lands. You want to get those burn shock lands. But in this case, I don't think it's necessary, and it's very expensive financially to do that. Tramway Station is going to give us some card draw, possibly. And Voldaren Estate, of course, is for our vampire synergies, and it gives us blood tokens. So that's great. Awesome, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know if you like this video. Let me know if you have any suggestions on what you would do with EDGAR Markov. And let me know if there's any pet cards or themes or things that you want to see, or if there's a commander you'd like to see me build around. Thanks, and I'll be back soon.